Isaiah Fletcher had a rule about the drive home from the lumber yard: no stopping after dark. 2 years of driving that stretch of Route 14 alone had taught him that nothing good waited on the shoulder of a rural highway at 10:00 at night. But he broke his own rule anyway, because something about the way the woman was walking, arms curled tight around a bundle, head down against the rain like she'd been walking a long time and had stopped expecting anyone to stop, made the decision for him before he'd finished thinking it through. He was a big black man in a rain-soaked work flannel, and he knew how that could read on a dark road, so he kept his hands where she could see them and his voice low when he rolled down the window. Her name, she told him once she was in the truck and the heater was going, was Nell. She didn't offer a last name and he didn't ask for one. The baby, a girl maybe 10 months old, had gone quiet against her chest, worn out from crying. Nell kept one hand pressed flat against the baby's back the whole ride, like she was checking every few seconds that she was still breathing. Isaiah didn't push. He'd learned that much from 3 years of parenting alone, that people talk when they're ready and not a second before. So he drove wipers thudding and let the silence sit until it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. His house was a mile off the highway, porch light on, because Zora didn't like coming home to a dark house. Zora was sick sharp as a tack and currently asleep at her grandmother's, which was the only reason Isaiah had been out this late in the first place. He hadn't planned on bringing anyone home. He also hadn't planned on leaving a stranger on the side of the road in the rain. Inside, Nell stood dripping in his kitchen, and for the first time under real light, Isaiah saw how bad it actually was. Her lips faintly blue, her hands shaking as she tried to unwrap the baby without waking her. He didn't say anything about it. He just pulled a towel from the hall closet, set the thermostat higher, and put the kettle on. "There's a bathroom through there," he said. "Hot water works fine. I'll find something dry." She hesitated at the doorway like she expected the offer to have a catch. When she realized it didn't, something in her shoulders came down half an inch. By the time she came out in one of his old sweatshirts, the baby fed and asleep in a laundry basket lined with blankets. Because Isaiah didn't own anything else that would do, Nell sat at the kitchen table and finally looked like she might say something real. Instead, she said, "I should go. I don't want this to be a thing." "It's 11:00 at night and it's still raining," Isaiah said. "You're not walking anywhere." "You don't know me." "No," he agreed. "But I know what 40-degree rain does to a baby that age. You can go in the morning if you still want to." She studied him for a long moment, like she was trying to find the angle, the thing men usually wanted in exchange for a favor like this. She didn't find it because there wasn't one. Isaiah had lost his wife Camille 2 years ago to a fast, ugly cancer, and somewhere in the wreckage of that year, he'd stopped being the kind of man who expected anything back for basic decency. He just knew what it was to need somewhere to land and have nowhere. "Thank you," Nell finally said so quietly he almost missed it. Notice what he never did that night. He never asked her what happened, never asked what she'd done to end up out there, never asked her to earn the towel or the tea. There is a kind of help that comes with a bill attached, and most people who have been hurt can smell it from across a room. The other kind just sets the kettle on and goes quiet. If you ever want to know which kind you're offering, count how many questions you ask before you hand someone the towel. She didn't leave in the morning or the morning after that. And Isaiah, watching her flinch every time his phone buzzed on the counter, understood without her saying it outright that whatever she was walking away from on that highway wasn't behind her yet. By the end of the first week, Nell Ashford had made herself small in ways Isaiah noticed, but didn't comment on. She washed every dish before he could get to it. She kept her few belongings, a duffel bag, a diaper bag, nothing else packed by the door, like she was ready to leave the second she overstayed her welcome. She flinched at raised voices, even Zora's, even when Zora was just excited about a cartoon. That is the thing people misread about someone coming out of a house like the one she'd left. The dishes weren't gratitude, and the packed bag wasn't rudeness. Both were survival habits learned in a place where being useful bought you a quiet evening and being ready to run bought you a way out. She wasn't being polite in Isaiah's kitchen. She was still working a job she'd technically quit 3 weeks earlier. Zora, for her part, had adopted the baby. Winnie Nell finally told them short for Winifred, with the total uncomplicated devotion only a 6-year-old could manage. She narrated everything to Winnie in a running commentary like she was giving a tour of the house to a very small, very unimpressed guest. It was Zora's fever in the second week that told Isaiah something about Nell he hadn't expected. Zora woke up at 2:00 a.m. burning up, and before Isaiah had even gotten the thermometer out of the drawer. Nell was already kneeling by the bed, 2 fingers at Zora's wrist, counting. Her pulse is fine. It's just the fever spiking with the growth. Kids do this. Lukewarm bath, not cold, and half a dose, not full. She's small for 6. She said it fast, clinical, the words of someone who'd said them 100 times before in a room that wasn't a bedroom. "You a nurse?" Isaiah asked. Something closed behind her eyes. "I was." She didn't offer more that night, but 2 days later, over coffee, neither of them had meant to sit down, for it came out in pieces. An ER in Spokane, 4 years of night shifts, and Shane Mercer, who she'd met when he came in with a work injury and stayed charming right up until the day 8 months pregnant. She mentioned wanting to go back to her mother's for the weekend and watch something in his face rearrange itself into something she didn't recognize. It hadn't been one bad night. That was the part Isaiah understood without her having to explain it. It had been 100 small ones, each one a little worse, until the night Shane took her car keys and her phone to keep her safe. And she realized safe wasn't a word he used the way other people used it. She'd left with Winnie 3 weeks ago in the middle of the night with cash from an account he didn't know she still had. "He doesn't know where I am," she said. "He can't. I was careful." Isaiah believed she'd been careful. He also noticed 2 nights later the way she went rigid when an unfamiliar truck idled too long outside the hardware store where she'd started picking up part-time hours at the pharmacy counter using a name that wasn't quite hers. He noticed it again when her old phone, the one she kept off buried in the bottom of her bag in case her sister needed to reach her, lit up on the counter with 3 missed calls from a blocked number, then a text that just said, "I know you're close. I can feel it." She didn't cry when she read it. That scared Isaiah more than tears would have. She just went very still, the way people go still right before they start running again. "I have to go," she said. "I can't put you and Zora in this." "Nell," he said her name plainly the way he'd say a fact, "running again isn't a plan. It's just delaying the next time he finds you." "So what's the plan?" Her voice cracked on it. "Because I've been out of ideas for 3 weeks. Isaiah didn't have a clean answer, but he had a phone and a number for a domestic violence advocate his sister-in-law had used years ago and a spare room he wasn't in a hurry to see empty. "The plan," he said, "is we stop treating this like something you have to survive alone." Outside headlights swept across the kitchen window and kept going. Nell watched them the whole way down the road, jaw tight, one hand resting instinctively protectively over Winnie's basket. The advocate's name was Marlene, and she worked out of a modest office above a bakery in the next town over, and she was entirely unimpressed by Shane Mercer's history of harassment texts and his habit of tracking a car through a family member he'd charmed into oversharing. "This is exactly the pattern," she told Nell, laying out forms across the table. "And it's exactly the kind of pattern that ends when someone builds a paper trail instead of running further. They built one. A protective order request, a statement, copies of the texts time-stamped." Isaiah sat in the waiting room both times, not because Nell needed a chaperone, but because she'd asked him to be there. And that had felt like its own small, significant thing. Shane found the town 9 days later. Not through cunning, through the sister who hadn't meant any harm and hadn't understood what she was handing over. He showed up at the pharmacy first, calm, reasonable sounding, asking the counter girl if a Nell Ashford worked there, using the tone of a man who believed his own version of events completely. Nell wasn't on shift, someone who was called Isaiah before they called the police, because in a town of 100 people, everyone already half knew whose truck belonged to whom. He came to the house at dusk. Isaiah saw the unfamiliar sedan slow at the end of the driveway and felt something in his chest go very cold and very clear at the same time. He didn't grab anything. He didn't need to. He walked out onto the porch, phone already in his hand, thumb over the keypad, and stood there. Not blocking the door, not squaring up, just present, immovable, ordinary, in a way that gave Shane nothing to push against. "She doesn't want to see you," Isaiah said. "This isn't your business." Shane's voice had the practiced calm of a man used to controlling a room. "I just want to talk to her, to my daughter." "You'll talk to her through the order that's already been filed." Isaiah kept his tone level. Behind him, through the window, he could see Nell standing perfectly still, Winnie on her hip, watching. Not hiding, watching. "There's a deputy 4 minutes out. I'd use the time to leave." For a moment, Shane's face did something ugly and uncertain. The look of a man realizing the story he'd told himself about how this would go didn't match the one playing out in front of him. Then the deputy's lights turned onto the road and he was in his car and gone before they arrived. What ended it wasn't Isaiah's size on that porch. It was the forms on Marlene's table, the timestamps, the deputy already on the road, the pharmacy girl who picked up a phone. A man like Shane runs on being the only version of the story anyone hears. The paperwork wasn't the boring part. The paperwork was the weapon. Standing between someone and the thing chasing them is rarely about being the strongest person in the yard. Most of the time, it just means being the one who stays visible, keeps a level voice, and makes sure the person behind you never has to face it alone. And gone as it turned out for good. A warrant a second town over waiting on unrelated charges that finally caught up to him 3 weeks later. Nell didn't cry in relief exactly. She sat on the porch steps afterward and just breathed long and slow like someone finally allowed to stop bracing. Isaiah sat down next to her, not saying much, because he understood by now that some things didn't need narrating. "I keep waiting to feel like I need to run again," she admitted, eyes on the tree line. "You don't," he said. "Not from this." "I've thought about that porch light more than the rest of it. He didn't leave it on for her. He left it on years ago for a 6-year-old who hated dark windows, and it just happened to be burning on the night a stranger needed to see a house from the road. I don't think most rescues look like rescues. I think they look like a habit of decency somebody kept up long before they knew who it would end up saving. Spring came slow that year the way it does in the valley, but it came. Nell took a nursing position at the clinic in town, her real name on the badge this time. Winnie learned to walk in Isaiah's front yard, 3 unsteady steps into Zora's waiting arms. And on the evenings when the rain let up long enough for the porch light to mean something other than come home safe, Isaiah and Nell would sit out there together, coffee going cold, saying less than they meant, and meaning more than they said. Until one ordinary Tuesday, without any fanfare at all, his hand found hers on the step between them, and neither of them moved it away. No one clapped, no one needed to. Some nights safety just looks like a porch light left on a door that opens without asking anything in return, and a family that built itself slowly out of the person who was brave enough to say, "I just need somewhere to go," and the one who didn't drive past. She never had to hurry into trusting him, and he never asked her to. A duffel bag by the door gets unpacked on its own schedule. If someone is still keeping one foot near the exit, let them. Keep the light on, keep the door unlocked, and let time do the part that reassurance can't.